The morning sun peeked through the windows of Harbor Brew, casting golden light on the polished counter I had sanded myself 5 years ago. I stood behind it, tracing the familiar grooves left by thousands of coffee cups, each one part of a memory I wasn't ready to let go. By nightfall, I was expected to hand over the keys to everything I'd built. "Emma, you know this is what's best," said Lillian Crawford, tilting her head as she adjusted her pearl earrings. My former mother-in-law had the kind of voice that made concern sound like a critique. "Running a business like this just isn't sustainable anymore. Not after everything. Not after everything." As if Derek's death 6 months ago had erased my capability along with my grief. As if I had suddenly become someone who needed managing, not someone who had created a thriving cafe from scratch. The Crawfords had never hidden their disappointment in Derek marrying me, a girl from a coastal town with flour under her nails. And now, they were circling like sharks, claiming they only wanted what was best for the estate. "We've actually doubled weekend revenue since expanding the brunch menu," I said quietly. "People are traveling from all over the Cape to try our new espresso blend." Lillian exchanged a tight smile with her husband Charles, who was inspecting our wall of local photography like it belonged in a flea market. "Emma, the profits you're impressed by won't survive the rising property taxes in this district," he replied smoothly. But they didn't know the real numbers. They had no clue that Derek and I had paid off the building in full last summer. We kept that, and a lot more, out of reach, because we knew exactly how far the Crawfords would go if they ever smelled leverage. But now Derek was gone. He died suddenly, a stroke at 37. And in the silence he left behind, his parents had pushed their way in. "The paperwork's ready," Charles announced, snapping his leather folder shut. "Jonathan Green from the trust office will arrive by 3 p.m. to finalize everything." Their lawyer, the one who'd somehow unearthed a decades-old clause in Derek's family trust that gave them partial claim. I didn't have the money, or the strength, to fight them in court. "I should keep packing," I said, turning so they wouldn't see me cry. Back in the supply room, Derek's apron still hung from the hook. The custom brewing system he bought me for my 30th birthday gleamed softly in the dark. "Don't worry about clearing all this," Lillian called out. "We'll send someone. You should start looking for other opportunities." The way Lillian said it made her intentions clear. She had a specific role in mind, most likely the receptionist job at Charles's law firm, which she'd been hinting at ever since Derek's funeral. A respectable position, she called it. I waited until they were gone before letting the tears fall. I slid to the floor behind the counter, clutching the worn leather notebook Derek and I used to sketch out our dream. Tucked between brunch recipes and cost breakdowns was a letter from the Harbor Development Office, dated just 2 weeks before Derek passed. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Crawford," it began. The letter confirmed what Derek had hoped. Our cafe sat directly on the future site of the city's seaside redevelopment plan, an ambitious initiative to transform the Marina District into a modern hub of upscale retail and dining. Derek had been ecstatic when we first caught wind of the plans. We attended late-night city meetings and whispered to each other over coffee, scribbling notes and circling possibilities. Developers had already sent quiet offers to buy us out, well above market price. But Derek didn't want to sell. We didn't want to sell. We had bigger dreams. I reached deeper into the notebook and pulled out a second set of papers, blueprints for a new version of Harbor Brew, one that extended into the vacant building next door, already purchased discreetly by Derek through a shell company to avoid attention. A 2-story cafe with rooftop seating, live jazz on weekends, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking what would become the pedestrian plaza. A knock startled me. Through the glass front door, I saw David Moreno, our longtime regular and a local real estate attorney, waiting patiently. "I heard about the sale," he said as I let him in. "Emma, you can't just give this up." "I don't have a choice," I said quietly, words worn down from repetition. "The trust. It's complicated." "There's always a choice," David replied, opening a thick folder from his leather briefcase. "I've been reviewing the property records. What the Crawfords are doing, it's legally shaky. If you'll let me help." "I can't afford it," I cut in, voice flat. "They drained me dry before I even had a chance to fight." David paused. His gaze softened. He had known Derek, knew our story, and he could tell there was more. "There's something you're not telling me," he said gently. I looked up at the cafe's wall clock, 10:45 a.m. The sale would finalize in just over an hour. Part of me wanted to hand it all over to David, the secrets, the hopes, the plan Derek and I protected. But another part of me, the one who'd been quietly preparing for this moment, stayed steady. "Just promise me one thing," I said, pulling an envelope from under the counter. "Deliver this to Lillian and Charles exactly 2 months from today," I told David, handing him the sealed envelope. He frowned as he took it. "Emma, what are you—" "Promise me," I cut in gently. "Not before, not after, 2 months to the day." Still unsure, he tucked the envelope into the inside pocket of his jacket. "At least let me look over the sale contract before you sign anything." "It's already done," I replied, not unkindly. "The terms are locked in. Just trust me, David." After he left, I spent the remaining hour walking through Harbor Brew one last time. I let my fingers trail across the countertops, the menu chalkboard, the old cash register Derek had restored for our anniversary. In the corner, our antique espresso machine gleamed under the light. We'd bought it secondhand and spent months bringing it back to life. The wall of photos showed smiling faces, regulars, tourists, birthday candles, proposals. In one frame, Derek knelt at the corner table, a ring inside a latte cup. My heart ached, but not from regret. At noon sharp, the bell above the front door rang. Mr. Green arrived, crisp suit and briefcase in hand, with Lillian and Charles flanking him like royalty inspecting a newly conquered land. "Shall we begin?" Mr. Green asked, laying out the documents across the largest table. I sat opposite them, clutching the leather notebook in my lap like armor. Lillian was already discussing their plans. Something about a luxury wine-tasting lounge with curated pairings and live-string quartets. They didn't ask if I was okay, they didn't mention Derek, they didn't even notice the quiet smile on my face. I signed the documents in silence, each signature a carefully measured move. Not surrender, but strategy. The keys landed on the table with a soft clink. "It's all yours," I said. "Emma," Lillian said, feigning tenderness, "I know this is hard, but you'll see. It's for the best." "This is really what everyone needs," Charles added, with rehearsed finality. I collected my bag and walked to the door. Before stepping out, I turned and said, "You're right about one thing. This is for the best." They didn't look up, didn't see the look in my eyes, didn't hear the truth behind my voice. In 2 months they would. 2 weeks later, in my small apartment overlooking the harbor, I sat reviewing the documents Derek and I had gathered over years: zoning updates, environmental studies, traffic impact projections. Color-coded folders lined my desk, and maps blanketed the wall like a war board. My phone buzzed. "David, they've started renovations. Lillian's supervising personally." David's text made me smile. I could just picture her, in designer heels, nitpicking over grout colors and layout options, completely unaware of what lay buried beneath Harbor Brew. The geological surveys Derek and I had commissioned 2 years ago confirmed it. Our property sat directly on the only stable access point for the massive underground parking structure at the heart of the city's seaside redevelopment plan. Without that access, the entire multi-million-dollar project would be delayed, or worse, redesigned at tremendous cost. A knock on my apartment door pulled me out of my thoughts. It was Maya, my former head barista, and one of the few people I still trusted. She held up her phone, face tight with restrained anger. "You need to see this." On her screen was Lillian Crawford's latest social media post, a carefully staged photo in front of Harbor Brew, the sign already torn down. The caption: "Big changes ahead. The Crawford Wine Lounge will bring elegance and culture to this long-overlooked neighborhood." "Long overlooked?" I muttered. "We had a wait list every weekend. People drove hours for our brunch." "There's more," Maya said, swiping through more images. "They're tearing everything out, even the original hardwood floors Derek restored." That name still struck like lightning. He would have been furious. But he also would have been grinning at what was about to unfold. "Have they found it yet?" I asked. Maya shook her head. "Not yet, but they ran into issues trying to move the espresso bar. Apparently it's anchored deep, like really deep." Of course it was. Derek designed it that way. That bar concealed the entrance to the reinforced storage vault we built into the foundation, a vault that held our most precious documents, including the original property deed with a very special clause attached. One that would upend everything. Anything from City Hall? I asked, turning to the planning board on my wall. Nothing official, Maya said, but my cousin in zoning says the public announcement is weeks away. They're just waiting for the final environmental impact assessment. I nodded, checking the date, 6 weeks until David would deliver the envelope. Then my phone rang. Lillian. I almost let it go to voicemail, again, but something in my gut said, pick it up. Emma? Her voice carried an edge I hadn't heard before. I believe the property is yours now, I said flatly. Yes, well, she hesitated. We've run into something unusual during demolition. The contractor discovered a reinforced room beneath the cafe floor. The architectural plans you're referring to didn't include a basement level, I said, voice syrup sweet. You mean the ones your lawyer handed over? The ones Derek and I revised before we submitted them? The silence on the other end of the line was glorious. What did you just say? Lillian's voice snapped into sharpness. Nothing that concerns you, I replied. The property is yours now, surprises and all. Good luck with the wine bar. I ended the call before she could respond. My heart was racing, but not with fear, with momentum. The game was officially in its second act. That night, I met David at a small diner tucked between the marina and downtown. The envelope I'd given him sat between us, untouched but heavy with significance. He had brought my leather notebook, now accompanied by additional documents. This is huge, he said, scanning the original deed. Emma, the mineral and subdevelopment rights, plus the geotech surveys. The Crawfords bought the surface. Everything beneath it still belongs to you. I nodded. They never read the fine print. Derek made sure they never would. David looked stunned. This was all his idea? Mostly. We knew his parents would never stop trying to control him, or us. This was his way of staying ahead of them. He knew what they were capable of. My mind flashed back to the day Derek told them he was leaving the family firm to open a cafe with me. Charles's face, twisted with disgust. Lillian's weeping theatrics. They used every clause in the family trust to pull him back into their orbit, but Derek had been deliberate, strategic. They thought he was just playing barista, I said softly. But he was building an empire they couldn't touch. David checked his phone. The city's announcement is next week. Once it's public, every property in the Marina District will triple in value. The Crawfords will think they've struck gold. Until they try to sell, I added, and learn they can't, not without my approval. They'll push back, David warned. They have money, connections. And I have this, I replied, pulling out one last document. A letter in Derek's handwriting, dated 5 days before his death. It laid everything bare. His parents' manipulations, the threats, and his intention to split the property rights to protect me and our legacy. I glanced at the calendar. 2 more weeks. Then you deliver the envelope. The days blurred as I prepared. Through Maya's network of loyal regulars, I stayed updated on renovation progress. They'd found the vault, but the steel-reinforced door had them completely blocked. Lillian, according to whispers, was livid, convinced I'd hidden treasure inside. She wasn't entirely wrong. If you're holding your breath like I am for what happens when that envelope is finally opened, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss the moment everything turns upside down. The real twist is just beginning. She wasn't wrong, but she was looking in the wrong direction. Exactly 1 week before David was set to deliver the envelope, the city made its long-awaited announcement. With headlines, press conferences, and flashy renderings, the Seaside Renewal Initiative was officially unveiled, a $1,200,000,000 0-cents project that would turn the sleepy Marina District into a glittering urban destination. Property values in the area doubled overnight. Real estate agents began descending like vultures, waving contracts at every business owner in sight. On social media, the Crawfords couldn't stop congratulating themselves. Photos of Lillian in a hard hat, captions about transforming the community, and hashtags like Crawford Vision. I watched it all from my apartment, noting every development on my now crowded evidence wall. The new renderings made it plain. The central underground parking hub, the project's beating heart, could only be accessed through one point, 425 Harbor Avenue. The former Harbor Brew building. There was no backup route. Any alternate path would require demolishing landmark-protected buildings. Then came the call I'd been expecting. "Ms. Moreno," the voice on the other end said. "Daniel Price here, lead developer for the city's initiative." "Oh, this about the Crawford Wine Lounge?" I asked sweetly. "Well, yes. That's part of the issue," he admitted. "Records show you retain ownership of several sub-property rights. We'd like to arrange a meeting. The city needs those access rights, and the timeline is tight." I leaned back, eyes flicking to the envelope still sealed on my desk. "I'm aware," I said, "but I should let you know. I've had a few offers." He named a number that made my breath hitch. I countered with one that made him pause. By the end of that call, we had a tentative agreement, one that would make me more than wealthy. But this wasn't about revenge or riches. It never had been. 2 days before the envelope was due, Lillian showed up at my apartment without warning. Her makeup was perfect, but her expression was cracked, panicked beneath the poise. "What are you playing at?" she snapped the moment I opened the door. "The city keeps hitting delays. They say you're involved. What did you do?" I stepped aside. She entered slowly, her eyes landing on the wall of maps, deeds, letters. Truth. In physical form. "Derek and I planned for this," I said calmly. "He knew you'd try to take what we built, so we made sure you could only take what we allowed." "You can't do this," she whispered, voice shaky. "We own that property." "You own the top, Lillian," I replied. "Everything below? That's mine. And soon, the city will be paying me for it." Lillian sank onto my couch, her tailored blazer and designer heels suddenly looking wildly out of place in my modest one-bedroom apartment. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Why would he do this to us? To you?" I let out a short, bitter laugh. "You spent years trying to control him, dismissing his choices, using the family trust like a leash." I met her eyes. "Derek built something real, something honest, and you couldn't stand it." "We were trying to protect him," she whispered. "That cafe, he was meant for more." "No, that cafe was his dream, our dream," I said, cutting in. "And now it's going to fund everything we ever planned." I handed her a folder, the city's updated development blueprint. She scanned the documents, her hands trembling slightly as she pieced together the full picture. The property she thought she stole was a facade. The true value, the underground access, still belonged to me. "Charles will fight this," she said faintly, but the fire had faded from her tone. "Good," I replied, "because in less than 48 hours, you'll receive something Derek wanted you to see, a long time ago, a parting gift." Lillian left looking rattled, her perfectly composed exterior cracking like old porcelain. From my window, I watched her slide into her sleek black car. Her knuckles were white around the steering wheel. The next morning, I visited Derek's grave, thermos in hand filled with the dark roast he used to drink while we scribbled ideas in that leather notebook. "We did it," I whispered, kneeling. "Everything we dreamed of, it's finally unfolding." Less than 24 hours remained. Inside David's envelope were copies of every document that mattered: zoning records, survey maps, deed clauses, and most importantly, Derek's handwritten letter, detailing years of coercion and the legal firewall he built to keep his parents from seizing what wasn't theirs. The game was nearly over. At 8:57 a.m. the next morning, I sat in David's office, watching his laptop stream security footage from the Crawford law firm, a clean feed from the front desk camera. "They're all there," he said into the phone. "Charles, Lillian, their legal team. Looks like even a few board members showed up." "Perfect," I breathed. Exactly how Derek wanted it. At 9 o'clock sharp, David was led into their conference room. We couldn't hear them, but we could see everything. Lillian opened the envelope first, her face drained of color. Charles snatched the papers from her hands. As he read, his jaw tightened, and his grip clenched. Inside that envelope was everything. The property split, the trust manipulation records, and Derek's final words to his parents. the ones they were never meant to forget. Dear Mom and Dad, the letter began. If you're reading this, then everything has unfolded exactly the way I anticipated. You've tried to take what Emma and I built, believing you could sweep in, rewrite the story, and call it your own. But I've spent years preparing for this moment. I protected our legacy from your greed long before you even realized there was something to take. My phone buzzed. A message from Maya. They're tearing up the cafe floor. Attached was a photo of contractors jackhammering through the hand-laid hardwood Derek had restored himself. Beneath it, thick slabs of reinforced concrete. They were desperate, digging for a vault they thought held some hidden fortune. What they didn't realize was that the true treasure wasn't locked away. It was legal and already in motion. Back on the security feed, I saw Charles leap from his seat, face twisted in fury. The other attorneys flipped through the paperwork in stunned silence. Some shook their heads. Others made frantic calls. David leaned in toward his mic. They've found the clause. They know now. Without the subsurface rights, they can't sell. No developer will touch it. Another ping from Maya. City inspectors just arrived. They're posting permit violations for unauthorized demolition. Everything was falling into place. Derek's plan, perfectly timed. The Crawfords were so obsessed with seizing control, they'd skipped basic due diligence. Now their self-congratulating renovation efforts were becoming a legal and financial disaster. Then my phone rang. Daniel Price from the city's development office. Miss Moreno? He said without small talk. We've reviewed your revised counteroffer for the underground access rights. The council has approved the full amount. I couldn't help but smile. The number we'd agreed on was triple what the Crawfords paid for the entire building. When would you like to finalize paperwork? I asked. That's actually why I'm calling, he replied. Their lawyers reached out. They're accusing you of fraud. They claim the subsurface rights weren't properly disclosed in the sale. Page 18, I said calmly. Section 4, Clause C. It spelled out clearly. They signed for surface rights only. It's in black and white. On the feed, I saw Charles storm out of the room, barking into his phone. Seconds later, my phone lit up again. His number. You planned this, he growled. You and Derek set us up. No, Charles, I said evenly. You set yourselves up. You were so sure you could bulldoze your way through. You didn't even bother to read the terms. We'll fight this, he spat. We have influence, resources. So do I said, not missing a beat. Thanks to you, actually, I said. The money you paid for the surface rights? Derek and I used it to retain the best property attorneys in the state. I paused. Would you like their contact info? Charles hung up without a word. Back on the feed, I watched him re-enter the conference room. The other lawyers were already packing up, clearly wanting nothing to do with the legal storm brewing. Lillian remained seated at the table, Derek's letter trembling in her hands. Even through the grainy footage, I could see the tear tracks on her face. By that afternoon, news of the Seaside Renewal Initiative was everywhere. Headlines, news segments, press quotes from city officials. Property values around the Harbor District soared again as plans for luxury shops, boutique hotels, and high-end dining were released to the public. The Crawfords Wine Lounge, once smugly branded as a cultural gem, now looked absurdly out of place. Pretentious, yes, but worse, irrelevant. That evening, I met Maya for coffee, ironically at the rival cafe down the street that used to glare at Harbor Brew with envy. She slid her phone across the table. Social media's blowing up, she said. Everyone's saying the Crawfords got played. She scrolled through comment after comment, some laughing, others cheering. But the ones who really know, she said. Your old regulars? They're celebrating. I smiled, thinking about the teachers, dock workers, and retirees who used to fill our morning rush, people who believed in what we were building, who understood that Harbor Brew was never just about coffee. It was about community. My phone buzzed. David. Lillian's here, she wants to talk. 20 minutes later, I walked into David's office. Lillian sat alone at the table, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Derek's letter lay between us. Why didn't he tell us, she asked quietly, about the city's plans, about what you were building together? Would you have listened? I replied. Or would you have tried to take control of that too? She dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief, visibly shaken. We thought we were protecting him. The family name. The legacy. Derek built his own legacy, I said. And Harbor Brew wasn't just a cafe. It was proof he didn't need your money or your name to matter. She looked up, her voice fragile. And now? I slid the city's final offer for the subsurface rights across the table. This is what you'll be fighting if you go to court. Developers will wait years, but they won't forget. And when it's over, the law will still be on my side. She looked at the letter again. The things he wrote about us. That, I said gently, was his final gift. One last chance to see him for who he truly was, and to understand what really mattered. I left her there, Lillian, with Derek's letter and the city's contract, knowing she had choices to make. The Crawfords could drag it through court, burn fortunes trying to salvage their pride, but no matter how loud they shouted, they couldn't undo what Derek had done. He had protected our dreams so thoroughly that even in death, he still stood between me and their greed. 2 weeks later, I watched as the Crawford Wine Lounge sign was carefully taken down from the old cafe's brick facade. The sale of the subsurface rights had been finalized. The sum? Enough to buy back the surface rights, at twice what they had paid. Harbor Brew would reopen. Exactly as Derek and I had envisioned. The updated design preserved the heart of the original building while integrating sleek touches to blend with the city's new development district. And the rooftop garden, our late-night idea fueled by wine and what-ifs, was becoming real. David supervised as the last of our original equipment was moved back in, including Derek's pride and joy, the antique espresso machine he had spent months restoring. The vault, still unopened, and that was fine. Its purpose had already been fulfilled. David stood beside me as I unlocked the front door for the first time in over a year. The familiar ding of the bell above the frame echoed through the space. "They're still in shock, you know," David said. "Charles retired last week. Lillian hasn't shown her face at the club since." I ran my hand along the counter, fingertips brushing over grooves worn smooth by years of coffee cups and community. "It was never about revenge," I murmured. "Derek just wanted them to understand that success doesn't always look like what they expected." The morning sun streamed through the wide windows, lighting every corner with soft gold, the very light that gave the cafe its name. I hung 2 frames on the wall, one of Derek on our original opening day, grinning as he handed a latte to our first customer, and next to it, a framed map of the city's development. Harbor Brew now the anchor of the new district. My phone buzzed. A message from Lillian. "He'd be proud of you. Of all of this. Of what you protected." Maybe it was a start. Maybe understanding comes late, but still matters. I began prepping for our reopening. The grinder hummed. The aroma bloomed. A small crowd formed outside, drawn by the new sign and the old spirit. Harbor Brew would shine again, not just as a cafe, but as proof that legacy isn't inherited, it's built. "Ready to open?" Maya asked, tying on her apron. I touched the wedding ring I wore around my neck, feeling Derek in every brick and beam. "More than ready," I said, flipping the sign. And the morning light poured in. Truly, it means more than you know. This journey wasn't just about reclaiming a building or winning a legal battle. It was about honoring love, legacy, and the quiet strength it takes to protect what matters most, even when no one else sees it but you. So, if something in my story spoke to you, I'd love to hear about it. Leave a comment below. Tell me about a time you had to fight for something that others didn't understand. Or maybe a moment when you realized your worth was never tied to their approval in the first place. Because here's what I've learned. Success doesn't always shout. Sometimes, it whispers through every quiet choice you make when no one is watching. It's choosing to build instead of break, to protect instead of prove, to prepare instead of plead. If you're in a moment right now where it feels like the world's underestimating you, please, don't give up. Don't shrink to fit their vision. Define your own. And if you believe in that, if you believe in fighting with grace, in rising on your own terms, then hit subscribe. Not just for me, but for every underdog building in silence, waiting for their moment in the light. Because it's coming. It always is. And when it does, I hope you're ready to open that door, stand tall, and say, I never stopped believing in what I built. Just like I did. Let this be your reminder. The fine print of your life doesn't define what you're losing. It protects what you're not willing to let go. You're stronger than they think. You always were.